So yes, I think for 250 years, much of Western politics has revolved around the left versus right sort of politics, the divide that basically suggested that we had to choose between a left that was focused on the state, a right that was focused on the market, a left that was focused on the collective, a right that was focused on the individual. And that's how we've really thought about politics, not just in the West, but elsewhere, since Western ideologies have spread worldwide. I think what's really emerging now is a new divide between ultra-liberalism and anti-liberalism, because centre-left and centre-right parties have really kind of converged towards the centre. They've become very liberal economically as well as socially and culturally. And then you get a lot of opposition to that. You get Trump and Le Pen basically saying we don't want that liberalism, we want something that looks more like protectionism, nationalism, and so on. So the new divide is really between liberals and anti-liberals. So in some sense, yes, I think you're right. The meta divide is between liberals and anti-liberals. But some of those things, globalism would be on the side of liberals, nationalism, nativism would be on the side of anti-liberals. I think what's also interesting to ask is what this binary doesn't explain. And I think it doesn't explain a large number of people who are really neither. So I'm more thinking here of people or voters rather than elites, parties or candidates. And I think a lot of people are neither ultra-liberals or anti-liberals. I think a lot of people simply want mutual recognition. They want to derive both an income but also meaning from their jobs. They want basically to be in a society that respects them for who they are. And I think that's sort of a fairly broad majority, I would have thought, in many countries, that at the moment feel that neither the ultra-liberal extreme nor the anti-liberal extreme really speak to them and their interests. So it'll be interesting to see which political party, which movement, which candidate can articulate, for instance, a balance between patriotism and internationalism, which is, I think, where many people are. People have pride about their place, about their country, about their language and their culture, but also feel that they are linked to other human beings elsewhere. There's a kind of internationalism. And so if that can be articulated by a party or a candidate, I think that could be very powerful. Well, I mean, this is very interesting. The sheer rate of abstention in the French parliamentary elections, I think, really gives us pause for thought. So Macron looks like the savior. There he comes. He defeats not just the established parties, but also Le Pen. And people are cheering. And then a month later, all this mobilization has come to very little. And as you say, people have actually stayed away from the parliamentary elections. So that is really worrying, because it, I think, shows the sheer sort of disengagement from democracy. And we're seeing it elsewhere too. Rates of abstention are high. They're high in the States. They're growing elsewhere. In Britain, we've just seen people turn out for a vote, more so than before, but we don't know whether that will continue. It could just be a blip. So yes, we need to really think how we can engage people permanently in politics. And at the moment, most people are saying, politics, it's not for me, they're all the same, they all play by different rules. So yes, we need a properly popular politics, not populist, not elitist, popular in the sense of speaking to people's interests and concerns. And at the moment, I don't really see any evidence. And I would say that doesn't just apply to Le Pen in France. I think it applies now to other populist forces, because ultimately people have begun to see through that they are offering, terribly simple answers to very complex questions, and people just instinctively are not persuaded by this. So, Marine Le Pen promises essentially, huge, sort of levels of protectionism, and prosperity for workers by pulling out from the euro, but she's not able to explain how leaving the euro isn't going to be catastrophic in the short or medium term. She's got no answers to this. Just like I think when Macron is pushed on questions of social cohesion, he's struggling to say how actually he can hold French society together. So yes, I think both the ultra-liberals and the anti-liberals are failing. People are beginning to see that there aren't any simple answers, and yet they remain, concerned that actually both their identity in cultural terms and their economic future is really under threat. So again, where's the positive alternative to these two extremes? At the moment, I don't think it's there. So first of all, I think I would say that liberalism has clearly made a very important contribution in terms of certain ideas and institutions. So I'm not there to say liberalism, is a bad thing and we should get rid of it. But what I would say is that liberalism has inherited the most important principles from other traditions. So ideas about rule of law, constitution, the dignity of the person is not something liberalism invented. It inherited that from earlier traditions. So that's the first point. The second point is that, yes, it has inherited these things, but it's also begun to undermine them. So the dignity of the person is no longer at the heart of liberalism, because liberalism doesn't believe in the person, in all its sort of, in all the relationships that make up a person. It believes just in the isolated individual, and that's a real problem. Then it believes in a state and a market that regulate our worst behavior. So it actually has a very pessimistic view of the individual. It thinks that without state and market, individuals basically end up killing each other, right? That's the sort of Hobbesian, Lockean sort of point. And Rousseau is not pessimistic about the individual, he's pessimistic about society. He thinks when we live in society we start having conflict. So again, we need a state to regulate all that. So what I would say is that yes, liberalism has built certain institutions, parliaments, representative democracy, all of which is clearly very important. But it's also undermined the sense of personhood, which is something we have through relations with others. It's also undermined the very sense that actually certain things have intrinsic worth. So ultimately, liberalism believes everything can be turned into a commodity, right? So, people, nature, and that is a huge problem, whereas people and nature have intrinsic worth, and that's what we need to preserve, and liberalism isn't doing that, at least not contemporary liberalism. No political ideology invented the family. The family is an anthropological institution that's at least 5,000 years old, if not older. The trouble with liberalism is that it so much emphasizes individual freedoms and rights that it forgets all of the mutual obligations. Because when I'm a parent or a child, I shouldn't ask what am I entitled to, what are my rights. I should ask what are my duties towards others, duties of care, or duties of essentially helping when people need it. So the point is we're all born into relationships, right? That was Plato's and Aristotle's point. We're not asocial beings, we're social beings, we're political beings. Liberalism doesn't think we're social political beings, it thinks that we're asocial, apolitical beings who then contract with each other. But families don't contract with each other. They don't work on the basis of rights and contracts and entitlements. They work on the basis of duties. I look after you, you look after me. I give you something, you give me something back. It's a gift exchange. And liberalism has no comprehension of that. And that's a real issue. We see it today. It treats everything as an isolated, atomized individual. And that simply is very corrosive of society.